Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at this int melee build with a little bit of casting potential, but we're not going to be utilizing that too much. And this is a continuation of the build that I ran last time, so if you want to check out that video that goes into detail about all the stats and everything, I'll go ahead and link that on screen and in the description. But essentially this is a 46 int with 20 dex and 20 strength running at level 125. And I am very saddened to say that this has quickly become my favorite build. There are just so many fantastic options for how you can run this build. It has an answer for almost every question that you encounter in Invasions, and it also has a very high degree of skill expression. So it's effective, it's strong, it's skill expressive, it's just like everything that you could want in a build, and it just has so many good powerful options for when you need them. If you need a nice powerful ranged attack, you have access to that. If you have you need an area denial attack, you have that. If you need just something that's super aggressive, you have that. It's really insanely powerful for just, you know, the fact that it's an int build. And I think there's some stigma around int builds because you have some lack of skill expression, like when you just hang out and cast from the back, which, you know, is totally an effective way to play the game. It's super difficult to play against in a gank situation, and I think that's part of the reason I've always been so salty against it. But running an int build for essentially like the first time in over 2,000 hours, I mean, I think I dabbled with power stance carrions, but I didn't really take the full dive into all the different kind of weapons and all the different moves you have available when you're running really well optimized int build. And it's just turned out to be like one of my favorite builds I've used, just due to the sheer number of options you have available and how effective they are at countering different setups. So I think running the Halberd with the offhand Shamshir just kind of as a default was really nice, because you have pretty good ability to both be aggressive and defensive with the poise breaks you can get with the Halberd. You also have nice vortex potential because the Halberd mixed up with the Shamshir attack, so just kind of alternating between those two attacks allows you to just kind of vortex your opponent, and especially if they're mashing, like each of those attacks is going to poise break your opponent. Also, when they're cold infused, you're going to be able to go for a Halberd attack, follow it up by a Shamshir attack, and then if you hit them with the second Shamshir attack, which normally wouldn't poise break them, you'll oftentimes get the Frost proc, and that will in fact poise break them. So they'll get hit by 3 very quick poise breaks. They'll also be Frost proc, which means your physical damage is going to be more effective as you continue that, you know, fight essentially. And it's just a very strong setup. I mean, it's no secret that like Halberd off dagger or something was very strong and pretty meta, and you know, meta for a reason. But I think the Shamshir is a lot of fun and just kind of a different version of that I really enjoy running. So you also have access to something like an HTS, and you can Frost infuse that as well, or Magic infuse it. It's strong both ways. Something I liked to do was run the HTS with the Frost infusion, wait till they were frosted, and then if there was a spare moment, swap over to an HTS. It was actually just Magic infused, because you don't need that extra, you know, Frost buildup that you're kind of sacrificing a little bit of AR for. So I really enjoyed that. It's super effective, especially with Glintstone Pebble. They might be out of range of your HTS, you know, running attack, but you can still shoot a couple pebbles their way. So super effective for additional chip damage, especially when players are being pretty aggressive. Then you also have something like Helphen Steeple when you're looking for something that's going to poise break your opponent with a little bit of hyper armor in the mix. So, you know, when you have players that are pretty aggressive and you want to just, you know, maintain your stance, you don't want to get poise broken yourself, the hyper armor is super effective there, and especially when buffed, the damage on Helphen Steeple is huge. So you don't get the same true combos you would with KGS or something, but it's still insanely effective. And I found just the sheer variety is awesome. You also have St. Trinas, which are very powerful and can do, you know, just a lot of damage because they're power stance straight swords, which is already strong. But the fact that you have sleep buildup gives you an ability to fight bad latency quite effectively. And you also have the option to Moonveil swap once your opponent is slept. So going for the Moonveil swap is a lot of fun. Again, this is some skill expression, which is great. You have to be able to swap quickly. And if you can swap quickly, then you'll be able to get that sleep proc. You have to know when the sleep is going to happen. So like you can't reaction swap. Essentially, you're going off of prediction. So you're just kind of keeping an eye on how many hits you've landed with the St. Trinas, and then rather than going for a follow-up L1, you're going for the swap. So there's some level of game knowledge there and just kind of prediction, but it can be a little bit difficult to actually land it. You'll notice on screen, like right now, I didn't time the sleep correctly, hit them with another L1, knock them out of the sleep proc, but we will be seeing some successful Moonveil swaps for the sleep proc. So again, like, such powerful options at your disposal. Glintstone Kris also being in the mix is insanely strong. Can oftentimes do half an opponent's damage. It has great tracking, has pretty good range. There's also a follow-up attack that people forget about a lot of times. So there's really just, like, the list goes on and on. The Death Ritual Spear, also great. So I don't know, I guess this is a very long advertisement for running an int melee build, and I think if you do, you just want to be set up with the full gamut of everything at your disposal. And if you don't want to use the Great Bow, or if there are specific weapons that you don't want to use, like, you can push that int a little bit higher. 46 is honestly kind of low for level 125, and you can boost it a little bit with the hat that I'm wearing, but you can push it up to 60 at level 125 if you just kind of min-max appropriately and limit your weapon choices a little bit. So I would say it's just extremely fun, and I'll go back into my normal kind of invasion commentary now, but I did want to talk a little bit why I like this build so much, and why I think I'll be returning to it in the future. And I know I was very hesitant to run an int build in kind of earnest, but I've had so much fun with this, and it didn't actually rely on casting very much. Like, having the option to cast sometimes can be nice, like Night Maiden's Mist is great area denial. Some of the other spells can be great for chip damage, but it you know, it felt much more like a melee build at heart, with just very strong ranged options. So moving into this invasion here, we were able to take care of one opponent with the Great Bow, just being able to use Rain of Arrows while they were distracted, and now we're applying additional pressure with the Glintstone Kris. And then we've isolated this opponent, we can switch over to our Halberd with our offhand Shamshir and just go ahead and deliver a decent amount of damage, kind of keeping it mixed up when they're close to us and off to our side. It's really nice to have the Shamshir attacks, just because they're a sweeping motion. The tracking is going to be a little bit in our favor compared to the Halberd, which is a little bit harder to track. And now the host is alone, and they begin progressing through the level. I go for basically the exact same jump they went for, despite seeing that they took some damage. So I was hoping to land on this ledge, same as them. Didn't completely land on the ledge, took some damage. So we do lose a little bit of health, but we are essentially just playing a one-on-one at this point, and they're in an area with quite a bit of PvE. They go for their parry, which, you know, I can't really blame them. It's something I would probably do in a situation like that, but then they get stuck behind the PvE that's absolutely mobbing them and get hit with the Death Ritual Spear. So we don't need to aggress too much in that moment. We have a nice ranged option to take advantage of the pressure they're under from the PvE. And moving on, we are going to start things out with just a little bit of chip damage from the Great Bow, and that's something that I definitely like to do. I'm not usually trying to one-shot people from a distance. That just, like, doesn't feel great in terms of, you know, the satisfaction from a successful win. If you just, you know, use the Death Ritual Spear over and over again, it can be effective, but it's not the most fun way to win an invasion, and honestly, it's not great content. So we just go for a bit of chip damage, get a feel for how much vigor they're running, and then run in. We do see this player running the Raptor Talons with Bloodflame Blade, so that's definitely a scary setup. We run in a little bit maybe too aggressively, and then we get trapped in these trees, so it was a little bit hard to see them. Sometimes they, like, turn a little transparent, which I can understand, but it can make getting stuck there very dangerous. And now that they've pulled out an option that has some very annoying poise break potential with it, especially from a distance, we're going to go ahead and switch over to Raptor Talons ourselves. And these are frost infused, and the fact that we have Endure is also extremely helpful. So the true combo just allows us to deliver a bunch of damage, and then the fact that the Raptor Talons have Endure on them means we can run in and be a little bit more aggressive when you have an Ash of War like the Falling Beast Star Jaw. Just, you know, sending big projectiles your way. So we do get it into a one-on-one at this point. We begin to aggress. We're alternating a little bit between our Halberd and our Shamshir, and then we swap over to the St. Trinas. this player is playing a little bit passively, and we're getting some phantom hits, so the status pressure with the Trinas can be quite helpful. You can see there we're getting ready to swap, wondering if we were going to actually deliver the sleep proc there. The same thing again, we're not exactly sure when the sleep proc is coming, but this time we do predict it correctly and swap over to Moonveil and get the finish. So again, not super necessary, but it's fun skill expression, it's stylish. It's usually something I would go for when it was a one-on-one with the host, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. So this next one is a little bit silly. We do have some players going for some elevator shenanigans. They were trying to knock me off the ledge as soon as I came up the elevator, but that's why we had Endure in the mix. We also used Uplifting Aromatic so that we'd be able to tank some additional damage quite easily, and then we switch over to Glintstone Kris real quick and get quite a bit of damage very easily. So again, these swaps just make this build so much fun and really kind of keep your opponents guessing. They need to be prepared for powerful ranged attacks, powerful pressure from melee attacks, powerful hyper armor. Like it's a difficult build to play against, and really gives you an advantage as an invader that I think few builds do so effectively. So we are going to be swapping quite a bit. We do want Endure for their Dragon Halberd, which has a long chain of attacks, and we also just see that it's possible we can get stuck in some tight corners here. So we do get hit with the Dragon Halberd, and then we get hit with some Madness incantations. Fortunately, with the help of Bloodhound Step, we're able to get out of that a little bit, and then here we go for a turn and burn at this point. They've been so aggressive, we need to do something to punish that effectively and just kind of give ourselves some space. So we do manage to get Waves of Darkness to connect, and then here we get just a really nice swing. They go for a jump, we swing our sword at the right time and effectively just bat them off the edge. So nice little bit of sports moments happening there. And moving on, we have a 3v1 in a tight spot. They go for Eleonora's Pole Blade with their Ash of War very early and can potentially land a lot of poise breaks on us. So fortunately we're able to get out of there pretty effectively, but we do have a lot of aggression as we're stuck in a tight corner. So we've already got our Zweihander out. It would not make sense to not use Waves of Darkness, so we go ahead and go for that. And then we're trying to kind of get out of this area. And we're going to go ahead and channel our inner bar of soap in this moment, try to be as slippery as possible and just get out of all these mashes that are happening, the different kind of Phantom Slashes and Eleanor's Pole Blades and Blood Loss buildup. It's a lot to be dealing with, but fortunately we don't get trapped on the stairs and we're able to give ourselves a little bit more space in this area that's honestly not great to be fighting in. It's hard to maintain pressure, there's lots of things you can get caught on, and it's just like there's no PvE. So we do manage to successfully take care of that player. Now this host is going for a lot of their Ash of War, so ideally we would like to drain them of some of their FP if possible. Here we get a nice hit with the Halberd that does prevent them from getting that blue flask off, and then we begin to pressure a little bit with the Halberd. We switch over to the Shamshir moveset. Using Sword Dance is going to be really nice just because you can hyper armor through some attacks and deliver quite a bit of damage. Even if the first swing doesn't hit, the second one often will, and there's a follow-up that you can go for. Sometimes it can be nice to condition your opponent to not go for the follow-up several times, and then if they look like they're going to try to punish it, you can just quickly go for that follow-up, which also has a lot of hyper armor. And at this point, they're going for a lot of heals. They also have their Ash of War they're using quite liberally, so we're going to go ahead and switch over to Trinas and see if we can't get that Moonveil swap again. So we go ahead and buff our Trina once. We have a unfortunate swapping moment where we're getting stuck in our menu, but we're still able to deliver a lot of sleep damage in the subsequent moments. And this time we get a nice jumping attack, go for the Moonveil swap, and deliver over 700 damage. So quite effective if you can land it. And moving on, we're going to start things off with the Death Ritual Spear. Again, doing quite a bit of damage, switching over to Moonveil very, very quickly, and getting that finish. Now, this player is running Eleanor's Pole Blade. This is going to be an attack that is parryable. So this was something to do with the Bad Red Man Bounty Board challenge. I was hoping to get a riposte from this PvE while the host was going for their attack. So the golden parry was supposed to be at a distance, and it was just like you're essentially trying to set up a parry for somebody else to grab the riposte. So I did end up successfully getting that, and this was essentially one of the trials of that. I swapped back over to Moonveil and just get the very long ranged attack as they roll away, so that was quite effective, and we didn't get the successful parry riposte in that invasion, but we did get a successful win. So moving on, we have this very cheesy gank setup here where we have a player with a greatsword. We also have the power stance giant crushers, and essentially what they're going to be trying to do is frame trap me. So what they want to do is deliver ranged attacks by the host from the back, and then while I'm trying to roll those ranged attacks, the goal is for the Phantom here with the giant crushers to land a jumping attack. So we don't see this kind of in full-fledged form right away, but as they try to get up the ladder, we really don't want them to be able to get up the ladder, because once you go up the ladder, you're essentially dead, since at the top of the ladder, if they're able to knock you down, and all it takes is a volcano pot, they're, you know, going to be winning the invasion. The distance from the top of the ladder to the bottom will definitely kill you. So we need to be, you know, kind of careful and make sure that they don't get up the ladder. We want to really deny that area from them. So again, we start seeing the Ashes of War coming out and the hopes for the jumping attack. Fortunately, we're able to grab a nice backstab on the Power Stance Giant Crusher Ash of War, and we try to get the wake up with Loretta's Slash. Unfortunately, it doesn't connect, and this player is able to successfully get away. And then we do see some pressure coming out from the side of the player with the greatsword. And here is when the frame traps become pretty effective. So this golden ring does come backwards and forwards, and if you roll the ring rather than the Giant Crusher jumping attack, you're going to take a ton of damage. So in this instance, it's honestly much better to just pay attention to where the player with the Giant Crusher is, eat some damage from the rings, and just not get hit with the jumping attack. And obviously if you can strafe the rings, that's ideal, but really you want to make sure your roll is timed for the jumping attack of the Giant Crusher. So there I thought I was out of range. Unfortunately, Elden Ring doesn't quite work like that, so we do need to change our strategy. We're just not in a good position, so we switch over to Waves of Darkness. A blue is coming into the world, and we're going to try to get a heal off, but fortunately we're able to just hyper armor through their L1 and kill both of them in the same moment. So definitely a risky play, but the hyper armor you get is going to also negate some of the damage, and we're able to successfully take care of two players at the same time. So really just trying to play this a little bit more smart rather than working too hard was the right play, and just kind of punishing their aggression as they come out into a really dangerous spot is quite useful. So at this point I was potentially a little perturbed by their playstyle. So I was thinking about setting up a parry. The opportunity didn't really reveal itself, so I ended up just kind of hanging out in my menu with the option to hard swap over to a parry. But we do begin pressuring with the Halberd and off Shamshir, and we don't have a perfect connection. There's definitely a little bit of phantom range from this player, so we do want to space kind of appropriately for that. Here we almost get a nice vortex going, but unfortunately they're able to get out of there. Again, thinking about a parry, so going into our menu. This time we actually will pull out our parry shield, see if we could parry a follow-up attack, but instead they roll out. So at this point we've kind of given up on the parry. We just feel that it's not worth it, and a blue has come into the world at this point, so we do need to be wary of the incoming projectiles from both the Phantom and the host. Now, I'm not sure how much FP this player had. It felt like a lot, but I guess that's par for the course, and it's not like Ashes of War consume that much FP these days. So we do come out with Loretta's Slash. We don't get it to connect, but that can be a pretty nice roll catch. We're out of FP, so we're going to go ahead and use our blue flask, and we're just going to back off a little bit. We don't want to pressure too much, and we're going to be at half health for a little while. Sometimes that can be a nice tool to just bait some added aggression from your opponents, even if you do have a heal to use. If none of the attacks feel like they're going to one-shot you, then it can be useful to try to bait some of that aggression. So we do see that coming out from the side of the blue, which is nice. We do need to be looking out for the Ash of Wars again. This player is using Power Stance daggers, so we know we can just kind of tank some of their attacks, and there we do actually get the roll catch with Loretta's Slash. More Ashes of War coming out from the side of the host here. and now just the pressure with the halberd and the offhand shamshir is pretty felt, and we do get a nice running heavy, and then we do some roll baiting with our little wagging of our shamshir. So potentially a little BG in the clear light of day, perhaps not the nicest thing to do, and maybe something that I would not do in the future, but sometimes those gank situations can just get under your skin a little bit. So here we get to see just a really clean chase down with the halberd and the shamshir. We're now in a 2v1, me and the omen with a host that's rune arced, and you know, they've got a weapon that can poise break, but it's kind of that, and the hyper armor is really all it has going for it, and it's also fairly backstabbable as the hitbox is not very sweeping. So we do end up running around grabbing that backstab. We get into pressure a little bit with the halberd, and then the omen just comes in, helps us out a bit, and grabs the finish. And moving on, we have the last invasion, and again, this is a work smarter not harder invasion, so we're gonna go ahead and try to send that elevator down, just, you know, see what happens. So we press that button, we actually miss it the first time, which is kind of funny, but we send the elevator down and just kind of watch the host for a little while, see what they're going to do. They finish off the giant pot, and they've, you know, it's unclear if they're going to go for the little guys, so we go ahead and try to defend them, and here we can see our handiwork with the elevator paying off big time as they just jump down the empty chute. So remember to always be intentional with your elevator placement. Now, moving on to the duel portion of the showcase, we have a player that's running a rune arc and hanging out in the lake, so always a good time. This player did try to chainsaw me later, so that was kind of funny. I invaded them a second time, and they did try to chainsaw me for a period of time. Unfortunately, they did not get it off, but this duel was kind of interesting. They go for Storm Assault several times, which is probably the most broken Ash of War at this moment because of the frame 1 hyper armor. We get them to fairly low health. We've also gotten them frost proc, and we are doing a decent amount of damage. We've popped their tier at this point, so they go ahead and go for a heal, which in my opinion is not the best etiquette for a duel situation, but neither is rune arcing, so you know, to each his own. And we're going to go ahead and begin to pressure with the halberd a little bit more. They go ahead and go for a turn and burn, but we're able to reaction roll it, and they're going to be going ahead and switching up their setup rather soon. They go ahead and switch over to the Gugs. Realize I said going ahead about 14 times in the last sentence, so sorry about that. And we're going to space that fairly effectively, but we may want to switch our weapons up a bit. So we're going to go ahead and go for an attack with the halberd. Swapping over to the Zweihander now, we do have Waves of Darkness in the mix, which is going to be quite helpful. They go for a heal again, and our health is not too low. I'm not sure if we've used a heal at this point, but it's just, you know, something to be aware of. We are probably going to flask because they've gone for a number of flasks, and we don't want to lose this at this point. So we do go for a crouch attack and then go into Waves of Darkness, and I think this is the first point we're actually healing, and they forget about the third wave, which is kind of classic for Waves of Darkness, and then they just rush in and get hit by the full combo. So an interesting duel situation. I thought it was hilarious that they tried to chainsaw me later, and just, you know, one of those likes encounters that you do in fact see sometimes. Now, moving on, we're going to be using the Moonlight Greatsword, which is also something that this build can do. This player is running a stone club that is Cragblade and has blood loss buildup on it, which is pretty scary. The stone club has hyper armor, which is very dangerous, and with the blood loss buildup, it makes trading into it even more dangerous because that's, you know, potentially going to do a big chunk of your health. Fortunately, we don't get blood lost, and we're able to finish them off with the charged attack. Now, this was a pretty good duel, rather. We're facing a player with a very similar setup and a more meta setup. So this is the halberd off stock with a clean rot. So this is about as meta as it gets these days, and we're running, you know, a slightly more off meta version because we have the shamshir rather than the offhand thrusting sword. So we're just trying to space and reaction roll appropriately. We're not getting baited into any rolls, which is pretty nice. We do start getting that combo that I really like, where you get a halberd attack followed up by a shamshir followed up by another shamshir, which usually frost procs, and we can see that just turns into a vortex. It wins the duel. So, you know, one mistake and it's over kind of thing is very possible in duels with this setup, and especially if you kind of time your vortex correctly. It's going to be very strong. Moving on, we have a player running in HTS, and we're going to be using our Shamshir with an main hand Moonlight Greatsword, and I definitely enjoyed this. It had a little bit more variety and just seemed to knowledge check players a little bit, because the timing for a greatsword when it's one-handed is not something you see that often. We'll also be running this with Helphen Steeple and an offhand Shamshir. So this player was running the Dragon Halberd, and that Ash of War is notoriously difficult to dodge, and it usually catches you, if not once, for all of the follow-up swings. So it can do a ton of damage, and we really need to be wary of that. We can't mash too hard, otherwise we'll just get hit with that hyper armor and eat a bunch of damage and likely get frost procced. So we're trying to be a little cautious of that and really time our attacks well, try to get some optimal poise breaks before they're able to hit that hyper armor, and you know, those are kind of the things going through our head. So here we are able to roll out and avoid the Dragon Halberd for the second time. This player is getting pretty low on health at this point, which is great. And we go ahead and grab a Frost Ballast. So that's going to at least relieve some pressure in there. After they swap over to the CGS, we're able to just punish their jumping attack with a hit from the Helphen Steeple. So moving on, we have a player that's running, it's a variation of Hellstock, one that you don't often see, but it's a little bit more bleed focused because you have the Vulgar Militia Saw. They go for Stormcaller, and that would be very dangerous with the Blood Loss proc, because that would be a bunch of successive hits all doing Blood Loss, but fortunately we don't get hit by it. We do get hit by the offstock, but we punish the follow-up with the offhand Shamshir and come out on top. Next up, we have a player running a shield and Nagakibo, which you don't see a ton, but it is an interesting setup. One that I think I would like to experiment with, honestly. I almost never run shields, but they can be fairly powerful. They do go for Carry and Retaliation, which is kind of cool. You can carry and retaliate that Ash of War, or the charged attack, I should say, rather, on the Moonlight Greatsword. So we do need to be just looking out for those type of projectiles, and they do get it successfully. So they go for a follow-up parry, and we were able to predict that and use the Shamshir rather than the Moonlight Greatsword with just a little bit of variation in our timing. We get a nice roll catch, and then begin swapping in between the Shamshir and the Moonlight Greatsword, and that can be really nice to just utilize the handy tech there, which will allow you to just maintain pressure a little bit. They begin to swap over to the Royal Remain set, and we're going to go ahead and hit them with Moonveil. So the Moonveil swap can definitely surprise your opponents, and yeah, that's all we've got for today. Hope you enjoyed the showcase. I do have a second channel. Also, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing to either one of my channels, that would be awesome. But yeah, I hope you have a good one.